I just spent 80 or so hours of my life playing through Persona 3 Reload, and to no one's surprise, it's good. I really enjoyed my time. Although there were a few things I think the original did better, so I want to talk to you all about them. Heads up, there will be spoilers here and there just for the sake of being able to compare certain elements between the versions. So if you're still playing through the game or plan to play through the game, maybe do that first. Persona 3 on PS2 is one of the hardest games I've ever played, and for all the wrong reasons. You can't control your party members in battle, their AI is incredibly bad to boot. There was that whole exhaustion system where people would straight up leave your party for the rest of the day if they got tired. Every other enemy has a goddamn insta-kill Mudo or Hama skill that will come out of nowhere and make you lose hours of progress. I can't even think of another game I've played in recent years that's frustrated me so much. It was the perfect game for when I needed the work, because when I would end up dying in the most bullshit way possible, losing hours of progress, I would just be done for sometimes weeks. Even little things like not being able to pick what skills a persona will inherit when doing a fusion, so you had to keep selecting and deselecting stuff until you got what you wanted. It was a painful experience. Anyone who's also played Persona 3 on PS2 knows exactly what I'm talking about too. And I don't mean on an emulator of save states and mods that give you control of your party members. This is a shout out to all my homies who also played on original hardware. You ever see someone on the street that looks utterly broken and wondered, hey, what happened to that guy? Persona 3 on PS2. We've seen some bro. Okay, maybe not as much as your average SMT fan, but those guys could look at a guillotine and go, hey, that looks fun. PSP version where you can control your party members, no BS where party members straight up leave you, and have those clocks that refill all your SP for chump change. Baby game. You don't even know. Despite all of that, all of the pain, all of the times I rage quit that piece of game, I enjoyed playing through it like the insane masochist I am, and the experience itself really stuck with me. A big part of that is the story and the overall mood of the game, in my opinion, is unparalleled. Both myself and my ex-roommate who had watched me play through most of the game both agreed by the end that if they were to ever make a remake of Persona 3, you know, something that had the story and overall mood of the original, with the more modern design tendencies of Persona 5, that would be the perfect Persona game. From that description, Persona 3 Reload is exactly the game I wanted. And before getting into the minutia, I want to make it abundantly clear that Reload is a very good game. Whether it's worth the asking price of $70 is a little more debatable depending on who you ask, but don't be mistaken. If you're a fan of JRPGs, Reload is definitely worth your time. Although in a bittersweet twist of fate, it's the game I asked for, but not the game I wanted. My hopes with Reload is that it would be the ultimate version of Persona 3, combining all the content from every version of the game. And it's not quite that. It doesn't have the answer scene in Fest, which was a 30-hour campaign that contextualizes the ending of the main game. And it doesn't have the female protagonist, or the social links of characters like Junpei or Akihiko from PSP. Who knows, Atlus might charge us another $30 or so down the line for all that stuff, but for all intents and purposes, what you're essentially getting is a remake of the original Persona 3. If they weren't aiming to be the be-all end-all version of P3, you know, the version you play if you want to experience everything in one package, my next hope would have been for it to take the same approach the Resident Evil remakes have taken, where it shares the same foundation as the original, whilst hitting new story beats that will surprise veterans. And Reload doesn't take that route either. There is new stuff, don't misinterpret me here, but the story is entirely the same down to the day. Like, if there's a cutscene on June 20th where your character sees Koro outside the dorms, you can bet your ass that same exact cutscene also happened on June 20th in the original. In fact, there was a bunch of stuff I thought they removed or changed to only find out I was mistakenly thinking about things that happened in the movie. In the game, Aigis is pretty adamant that she wants you to kill Ryoji so that your party will forget everything, opposed to the alternative of living the last few months of their life in fear of the fact they'll soon die. But in the anime, they took it a step further. When the protag tells Aigis he won't be killing Ryoji despite how scared everyone is, she freaks out and tries killing him herself, only to find out that Ryoji wasn't lying when he said only the protag has the power to kill him. It's a fantastic scene that, even though it didn't actually happen in the game like I gaslit myself into thinking it did, this could have been a chance to have it and various other scenes happen in Reload. The majority of new scenes and interactions are not moments in the main story and are instead just optional moments like studying with Mitsuru, cooking with Akihiko, reading comics with Junpei. The furthest Reload goes is adding a couple of scenes expounding on Strega's characterization a little further. They are cool scenes, which only made me wish they made some more drastic story additions even more. I started my playthrough of the original game I think 5 or so years ago at this point, but I didn't finish it until 2 or so more years later because the intro to Persona 3 is such a slow burn. Things don't start to get really interesting until about July in-game. And again, if they're not trying to make the all-inclusive Persona 3 experience that has everything from every version of the game, I wish they would have instead just taken new creative liberties, veering away from the structure of the original, creating a brand new experience to address things like that. It does feel like Reload is less of a companion piece to the original and more an attempt to replace the original despite not having all the content. And generally speaking, I still think they do mostly succeed. The biggest change and the biggest improvement, without a doubt, is the gameplay. Anyone familiar with the system in 5 will feel at home because it's a lot more comparable to that game. Super flashy UI, baton passes here from 5, now called shifting.
Time to no problem.
And this new theurgy system is genius. Basically, every character has an ultimate now that will ignore resistances and deal insane damage. And the condition to filling up your theurgy gauge differs depending on the party member. For example, Yukari's will go up anytime she heals someone, meaning you can use her special after 3 or so healing skills to your team. It helps distinguish every character, and for the first time ever in a Persona game, I had a really hard time deciding who I wanted in my party, which is a great problem to have in a game like this. Another great addition that prevents you from getting stuck with a certain party formation are these giant clock things that will bring 2 party members of your choice up to your current level. Characters outside your party won't gain EXP much like in the original, so this still gives you options without having to juggle everyone to make sure they stay viable manually. Genius addition. Tartarus saw a couple of makeovers as well. It was the same square hallway layout start to finish in the original, but each block gets a lot more creative with its structure and reload, which helps diversify what is otherwise a fairly repetitive game loop. But to be fair, it's a lot of fun now. Yeah, I honestly enjoyed scaling Tartarus in this version of 3. Something I once thought felt like a chore in the original. Only makes me wish the answer was here, since those changes alone would have greatly improved that playthrough. I do wish the game was a little harder. I'd be curious to hear how others feel about this, but for me, basically every Persona game with the exception of the original P3 and maybe P1 only gets easier as the game progresses. As much as the PS2 version made me want to tear my hair out, I kind of appreciated that it gave me such a challenge. I would go out of my way to see what bosses were ahead so I could make a Persona specifically catered to my next fight. In Reload, I never had to change my party or my equipped Personas for any of the fights. But yeah, I guess I still preferred that over the alternative. This isn't some giant comprehensive video covering every gameplay feature, but some other notable gameplay changes would be that the protagonist can only wield a sword now. He can't wield strike or pierce weapons as he could in the original. Locked chests from 4 and 5 are here, unlocked using a new currency called Twilight Fragments. Getting up from a knockdown does not eat up a turn anymore. Shuffle time now has you picking a card much like 4 instead of slowly mixing the cards around after each battle. That whole dual persona skill thing where you had to have specific personas on you to utilize it has effectively been replaced by the protag having multiple theurgy skills. Fuka got a complete makeover, now having her own SP bar that can actually be exhausted by revealing all weaknesses or using abilities outside of battle. Without a doubt, the best implementation of a navigator in the series thus far. Rush does not speed up animations anymore, kind of defeating the purpose of the feature. It adds speed lines and everything, but the animations themselves play out at the same exact speed. Lastly, Atlus made the bizarre decision to have characters freak out whenever someone is low in SP.
Sanada-senpai is running out of stamina! Be careful!
In most games, a party member will make a comment about being low on HP, which makes sense, they're about to die. But now, if you're low on SP, you will hear about it every time you exit a battle.
Yukari-chan, are you okay? Hang in there, Amada-kun. Leader, don't overdo it!
It gets old real fast. Some other downgrades here and there, like in the original when the girls walk into the hot springs while the boys are still there, you had to stealthily maneuver your squad MGS style, which has now just been reduced to a bunch of text options. But all in all, the gameplay is better where it matters most and is overall a huge improvement. Easily the biggest W Reload takes. Presentation was a little more hit or miss. I mean, undeniably, Reload is at a huge advantage given the original came out an entire 18 years ago on vastly inferior hardware, and as such, Reload is superior at least on a technical level. It's running in the Unreal Engine and it's rendered very well. I do think the style shines brightest when exploring Tartarus, especially with all the new flashy animations and UI. Atlus once again shows off that they are the undisputed champs at stylish UI and menus in the entire gaming industry. Most of the environments look great too, with the exception of 2 places. The first is the nightclub. You walk in and see tons of completely stationary people. It looks really bizarre. I feel even animating just 3 dance cycles for each NPC to use would have been better than, well, this. However, Club Escapade isn't that vital of a location beyond going there for one of the full moons, so it's not a huge deal. The big sticking point for me is the dorms. Compared to the moody, dim lighting of the original, it's extremely well lit to the point where the lighting itself is incredibly flat now. There was a lot of black used in the original color scheme, a lot of gradual shading. That's in comparison to Reload, where some areas don't look like they're being affected by a lighting engine at all, despite that typically being a strength of the Unreal Engine. It's the worst looking environment in the game now, which is a huge problem considering how important the location itself is. Like, honestly, I'd argue the dorm is the second most important location in Persona 3 behind Tartarus itself. Outside of brief sections where you go off to vacation, the dorm is a location you see every single day. It's where a lot of meetings are held, and it's also where a lot of the most important, most serious cutscenes happen. I mean, you spent hours upon hours of the game's runtime in the dorms. Opening of the game, for example, you're seeing all this disturbing imagery, and then this unfamiliar girl is about to pull out a gun on you. It's an intentionally uncomfortable opening. In the poorly lit atmosphere failure of the dorm adds a lot to that moment. In Reload, it's tonal whiplash, having what should be an ambiguous scene prompting the player to ask, what the hell is going on? Happen in what is now an extremely colorful and bright environment. In general, a lot of the most important moments in the story are diminished when the dorm feels this welcoming. Though I'm sure some will scoff at what I'm saying, I genuinely believe how the dorm looks and the overall tone it gives off is important to the overall mood the game is trying to achieve. Persona 3 is a dark game. I mean, one of the core themes of the narrative is death. The dorm might be a home base of sorts, but the moodiness of the original was a constant reminder that things are not okay, and you have a mission to carry out. And considering the original had softer lighting during the more lighthearted scenes that happened during the day, then darker, more gloomy lighting during the more intense scenes that happened at night, I think it's safe to say that having the dorm look the way it did was an intentional decision made to aid the weight of the ongoing narrative. Again, might seem small, but I think a lot of the game's moody personality is lost with the dorm looking like this. Dorm aside, the cutscenes themselves are also hit and miss in comparison to the original, pretty much across the board. Any scene in the original that just use in-game models being turned into fully animated cutscenes for Reload are a huge point in its favor. The death scenes in particular benefit a lot from being fully animated now. The inverse is also true, of course. On April 8th, when the game is still introducing the idea of the Dark Hour to the player, the original had a pretty intense cutscene of this guy living through the Dark Hour just to die. Cool stuff. However, in Reload, that same scene now looks like this.
What the?
With the exception of the first 2D animated cutscene, which I prefer for its faster cuts and more striking imagery. Every cutscene that was fully animated in the original that remained fully animated in Reload is a lot better. The team did a great job of all the reanimated stuff, although there are also cutscenes that were 2D animated in the original that are now mocapped, and those, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of those. It's not like, say, a Naughty Dog game, where even though a lot of stuff was mocapped, it's all really smooth, and everyone has a believable weight to them. In Reload, anytime an animation is motion captured, it is very obvious if the amount of awkward fidgeting all the characters will do. In scenes where characters are not moving much, the aforementioned death scenes for example, it's not too bad, and I totally take this over the scene not being animated at all. But cutscenes where the characters are performing some sort of action, the last cutscene comes to mind. The movements are a little clumsy. A lot of minor mistakes, like the hallway not panning behind Yukari for the last couple of frames before it cuts to Ken. I really hate that I noticed that. And now you too get to notice it next time you watch this scene, so you're welcome. The soundtrack? Well, I mean, it's a Persona game. It being anything but good would be a crime. I believe maybe with an exception or two, every song was re-recorded. And much like the presentation of Reload, it's hit or miss depending on the track. Persona 3 had a great soundtrack, so Reload of course likewise has a great soundtrack. That being said, and I definitely don't know music theory or anything like that, but I prefer the punchiness, is the word I would use, of some of the original tracks, particularly the dorm music. Here's verse 1 in the original.
So dance, while I put you in a trance. Let's party, boogie in your body. Work that body, make sure you don't hurt nobody. I say, hey, hey, hey.
And then here's verse 1 in Reload.
So dance, if you wanna go ahead. Free to do whatever, I'm chilling on my bed. I'm out in my biz, so mind your own biz. Whatever like is, we gon' flow with the set. Hey, hey, hey.
They even changed the lyrics, which I thought was odd. But lyrics aside, the new version seems like it'd be a lot more forgettable than the original version. It seems like a lot of people prefer the original When the Moon's Reaching Out Stars, for likely a similar reason. And I think I'm inclined to agree.
When stars spotted move, what a hollow in your eyes, just dialing your number. When stars smile the moon, the hollows in your eyes, just dialing your number.
One I think almost ruined some scenes was the new version of Living with Determination, which is a song that plays during the more emotional scenes. I found the new version is too heavy-handed to the point of being parody. For comparison, here's the original. Sad, but you know, not in your face or anything. And here's a new version. Immediately just slaps you in the face of that ensemble of high-pitched violins. The original version had those violins too, but the difference was that it eased into it naturally. Let me play the first 2 seconds of each version again. The new version starting up is the equivalent of someone telling you, "This part is sad. This is a sad scene," before the scene even starts. might seem like an odd nitpick, but I'm not lying when I say the abruptness made me laugh on numerous occasions, which is basically the opposite emotion trying to be achieved during the scenes in which it's used. Basically, if I was going to use a song in a meme of someone being sad, I'd use the new one. There are also some songs I think are better in Reload though. It's not often you hear a Persona song with a pan flute, but they added one during that song that plays during exams and it goes hard. Not to mention, all the entirely new songs are absolute bangers. The opening song, Full Moon Full Life, is among the best OPs in the entire series. As an aside, the accompanying animation of the striking colors and imagery is no slouch either. Seriously, what a great opening. The new battle theme, It's Going Down Now, is so good that I never got sick of hearing it even after hundreds of battles. Which is something I cannot say for... By far, my new favorite song was Color Your Night. That was stuck in my head for a week after hearing it. With how good the brand new music is, I wish they would have taken the opportunity to change more of the soundtrack. Like that one song that's like... Yeah, I would have not minded if they swapped that one out with something new. The last thing to compare is by far my biggest sticking point, and that's the new voice cast. I know there's a lot of people out there that scoff at the idea of playing a JRPG dubbed, but the reality is that anyone who played the original Persona 3 got pretty familiar with the English cast since we didn't have an option. So I think it's only fair to check it out and Reload and compare them. Between Persona 3, 4, and 5, the ones that contain a mostly voiced cast, the original P3 easily has the most awkward one. Characters like Fuka in particular were like,
You mean hack into their system? That's illegal.
wow, things are pretty rough when you sound more like a robot than the character that's actually a robot. For the most part, the new voice acting is an improvement, but it's definitely not as competent as 4 or 5, and in some cases, worse than the original. Although, to be fair, a lot of it just comes down to casting good actors for the wrong roles. I want to make it very clear, I'm critiquing these voices in regards to Persona 3. This is not an attack on the actors themselves, as basically all of them have done great work in other roles. Plus, there's a lot of factors to a good voice performance, and when you hear a bad one, unless you know everything that went down, you can't just immediately blame the actor themselves, because the reality is that you don't know the direction they were given, how much info they were given on the character beforehand, how much time they had, and voice acting is just hard. I certainly couldn't do it. Besides, in general, I'm not the type of person to get attached to certain actors. In fact, in most cases, I'd rather not know who's behind the mic because I want to hear a character, not a voice. It's when that immersion is broken, and I'm reminded I'm listening to a dude behind a mic, that I even have a problem. But again, it's less because of the actor themselves and more because my immersion was broken. Just keep that in mind when I'm comparing these characters to their original iterations. I guess for starters, I was shocked to see just how much of it was voice acted. Not only was every character from every social link finally given a voice, but every single level of every social link is voiced. Even super minor stuff, like you could take Koro on a walk and sometimes bump into other people, like those are voiced.
Oh, hey, what's up? Is that your dog? Wow, he looks like a smart one. Unlike his owner.
All of the social links finally being voiced makes following through on their storylines so much more interesting. I'm pretty sure when I played through on PS2, I mostly skimmed through it all because I only remember what happened in like 3 links. But now that everything is voiced, I intently followed all of it. Also, the social link voice acting, most all of them are really good. The voices for Kenji, Kaz, and Yuko are so good they are unironically better than some of your party members.
Tell me about it. And then Mr. Akoda got all pissed off. He called me to the faculty office and even yelled at me about the length of my skirt.
That young girl at the shrine genuinely sounds like a little kid, which is doubly impressive during the lines where she's choking up. Her link is already pretty sad, but the performance absolutely sells it.
I begged them to stop fighting so much, but they told me to leave them alone.
The 2 social link voices that did not work for me was firstly the voice of the Gourmet King. I don't know how else to put it other than saying that before even looking it up, I could tell the voice was of a guy that is, ironically, fairly thin.
Actually, remember that puny middle-aged guy from the other day? I bet he was an assassin!
He gets into the role for what it's worth. I just don't think his voice fits. And the second is Tanaka. The interesting thing about Tanaka is that despite being in Persona 3, 4, and 5, I don't believe he's ever been given a voice in-game until Reload. Now, especially if you haven't heard his voice yet, take a good look at this guy and just imagine in your head what he sounds like. Got an idea in your head? Okay, now.
You promise?
You better be ready to cross your heart and hope to die if you're lying to me.
Did it sound anything like that? Again, it's another performance you can tell the actor gets into, but after knowing this character for years before Reload, it's weird to finally hear his voice and have the immediate reaction of, that is not that guy's voice. Or at least that's the reaction myself and my friends watching had. The chairman is a lot better. And when I say a lot better, I mean a lot better. Him and Fukai I recognize as probably the weakest voice roles in the original, but it wasn't until comparing them for this video did I realize just how much of an upgrade his new voice is.
He's asleep, but he's definitely experiencing the dark hour.
He may be asleep, but he's definitely experiencing the dark hour.
It's no surprise, since it only appears during the dark hour.
It's no surprise you haven't seen it. Tartarus only appears during the dark hour, after all.
Takaya and Jin of Strega are a little different, but still good. The one I'm more mixed on is Chidori, although I'm admittedly likely to be more critical of it than most, since the relationship between Chidori and Junpei was one of my favorite parts of Persona 3. Chidori is a bit of a strange character with a distinctly strange voice, but I also think that's why it works so well.
Why didn't you call off the mission? Is it worth your life? Dying is what people fear most, isn't it?
It's a voice that if it were to be used for just about any other character, I would say it doesn't work. But Chidori is a very specific case. Not every line read was great.
Why are you in such a panic?
But it's the voice itself, not the performance, that oddly fit the character.
Thank you, Junpei. I had fun today.
You did?
It's time for me to go. I'll see you tomorrow, right?
Her new voice isn't awful, but the inflection constantly given is one of an emo girl about to tell her mom to stop embarrassing her.
Why are you panicking? I never asked for you to worry about me. It's nothing like that. I'm just drawing because I feel like it.
But then there's some reads where she doesn't sound like the same character at all.
Let go of me!
The original iteration of Chidori had a voice that worked, and at the very least, always sounded like the same character. This is a pretty multifaceted character. It's half the reason I liked her so much in the first place. But no matter how multifaceted a character may be, they shouldn't sound like multiple different characters within the confines of the same scene. I don't know if the direction given was just vague or what, because the voice acting during her death scene in particular is stellar. It's not like the VA turned in a bad performance. But up until that point, it feels like they're trying to find out what they want Chidori to sound like, and they don't figure it out until the very end. It was a little distracting. Then we got the meat and potatoes, your party members. Junpei was one I was worried about because of the original voice cast. He was easily one of the best.
By the way, I heard you two came to school together this morning. What's up with that? Come on, give me the dirt.
The new voice is definitely different, but it's still undeniably Junpei.
I heard you guys walked to school together.
What's up with that?
Come on. Give me the dirt.
It's a great voice. The actor has great range in that voice, and you can tell they really get into the role.
I guess wait, that's not what water gun means!
In fact, if I had a nitpick, I think maybe they get a little too into the role. During scenes when Junpei needs to be crying or yelling, it's spot on. It feels like you're listening to a real character.
You had that thing inside you and didn't even know it! You raised it, damn it! If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened!
But then there's scenes where I think they ham it up a little too much. Like, here's a read from the original.
You said my name. I was worried I'd never hear that again.
Compared to Reload.
You finally called me by my name. I wasn't sure if you'd ever say it again.
Like, why did he say it like that? What prompted him to say it like that? It's probably most distracting during the scene where he's telling the ghost story.
There are many strange things in this world.
There are many strange things in this world.
The other day, this friend of mine. That ghost must have tried to make her its dinner.
She went to the school at night and walked right into its deadly trap.
I mean, I guess I'd rather them have fun on the roll than not. I don't know, I felt embarrassed listening to it. And I think my friend watching felt similarly because he told me to skip it. But I also had another friend where I'm pretty sure she prefers the new delivery. And truthfully, I'm nitpicking. The VA does a great job as the new voice of Junpei. Yukari, not so much. This one in particular bothered me because Yukari is a very important character. I obviously don't have an exact count, but if I had to guess what two characters had the most lines of dialogue, it would probably be Junpei and Yukari. The snark of the original is totally gone.
He's staying here? You've got to be kidding me. He's staying here? Are you sure there wasn't some mistake? You have the potential? For real? Really? You have the potential?
Anyone even slightly familiar with Persona 3 definitely knows about the Junpei Ace Detective line, but compare her reaction between the two versions.
This is a tough case, even for Junpei Iori, Ace Detective.
Ace Detective? Are you stupid or something? Ace Detective? You're so dumb.
There's a line on April 20th where, in response to Mitsuru abruptly leaving, she says,
She's probably busy with things like student council, unlike us.
to which Junpei responds,
Ooh, Yucatan. Do I sense some hostility?
which is a totally valid reaction given the way she said it. She absolutely did sound hostile. In Reload, the inflection does not come across whatsoever, so Junpei responding with that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense anymore.
She's not like us. She's busy, you know, with the student council or whatever.
Whoa, Yucatan, do I sense some hostility?
It's hardly even the same character now. By replacing that signature sass with a tone that's a lot more gentle, she basically just sounds like Futaba now.
There you go again, acting like everybody's best friend.
Plus, it's not like Yukari was this constantly mean-spirited character. She was irritable, sure, but she also had plenty of moments showing her softer side.
I've been hiding so many things from him. As soon as he wakes up, I'll tell him the truth. So, thanks for listening.
But the important part was that when she needed to sound frustrated, she did. There's not much range on the new Yukari. Anytime she has to sound exasperated or shocked, it falls flat.
Who's there? Who's there?
I don't know how to stop this thing!
She doesn't do a bad job as Yukari by any means. In fact, on its own, Yukari's performance is fairly strong. It's just that the original voice of Yukari was debatably the best VA in the original game next to Junpei. The original voice made the character what it was. Plus, if I'm being completely honest with myself, it's possible I might have only been happy with the original voice. Mitsuru is so close to what I thought she originally sounded like, I thought it was the original actor reprising the role. But turns out no. Just happens to be someone who perfectly captured the character. In fact, I think Mitsuru might even be better in Reload. Especially during her father's death. Check out this back-to-back. Like, holy shit, did someone actually die? That was really good. Akihiko was one I thought I wasn't going to like when they were first showing off the new voice cast. Reason being is that the new voice of Akihiko is such a departure from the original.
I'm alright. Get ready to be surprised. It'll be here any second.
I'm alright. Get ready to be surprised. It'll be here any second.
Definitely a lot different, but I think the new voice on him works just as well. I was kinda shocked how much I warmed up to it, to the point where I would honestly go as far as to say it's the best new voice performance out of your entire party. Great range too. During battle, he's got a great aggressive voice.
It's over!
Then in more solemn moments, you totally believe the emotion.
She entrusted you with this life. Don't just throw it away.
The original Akihiko is still good, but surprisingly, I think I prefer the new one. Fuka is decent, although again, it's a huge improvement over the original.
The future hasn't been written in stone yet, and I want to be true to myself.
The future hasn't been decided yet, and I want to be true to myself.
Shinji is good. The new voice is more gruff and less surfer guy.
I made up my mind a long time ago. I ain't going back.
I made up my mind a long time ago. I ain't going back.
Different, but both are good. I don't really have much of a preference, to be honest. Aigis hasn't changed too much. She's got a similar voice, although I did notice that Reload does not have her start out talking like a robot like the original did.
I am Aigis. My mission is to destroy shadows.
I am Aigis. My objective is to exterminate shadows.
Characters comment on her becoming more human-like throughout the course of the story, but in the original, you could actually hear that progression. Compare that line again in the original to how she sounds by the end.
I am Aigis. My mission is to destroy shadows.
You're right. What am I doing? I understand now. So I should be happy.
It's night and day. It feels natural too, to the point where I didn't even notice how big of a difference there was until comparing it right now. If you're actually playing through the whole game, the transition is seamless. In Reload, she generally talks the same start to end. It doesn't ruin the character, but I definitely missed the progression in her voice. Ken is a 10-year-old who does not sound like a 10-year-old anymore.
Do you know why I asked you to meet me here?
Do you know why I called you here?
It seems like they're a competent voice actor. They read the lines well, but when I hear this voice, I don't hear an elementary school student.
2 years ago today, October 4th.
2 years ago today, on October 4th.
It didn't bother me as much as I thought it would since, yeah, the reads themselves are well done. That is apart from one crucial scene, Shinji's death. In the original, once Shinji dies, Ken screams and it sounded like this. Not amazing or anything, but it still sounds like a kid in anguish. More importantly, it's casting perfection compared to the new yell. Get a load of this. It's frustrating too, because up until that yell, I think Shinji's death is much more emotional in Reload. Even Ken's VA knocks it out of the park with reads like this.
But I can't.
Like, dude, that actually sounded like they were genuinely choking up at the recording booth. Well done. But that yell followed up by Koro's terrible not dog howl ruined the entire moment. Speaking of Koro, they are by far the worst new VA in the entire game, which is extremely funny to say because it's not even a person, or rather, it shouldn't be a person, it's a dog. But the problem with Koro is that it is so blatantly just some guy making dog sounds now. I was thinking maybe the original was also just blatantly some guy making dog sounds. I mean, it was on PS2, so it probably didn't sound good either. But after looking back into it, here's what it used to sound like. Wow, that is way cooler than I remembered. How's the new one sound again? How the f did they butcher it that hard? Koro isn't even that significant of a character compared to the other members of your team, and yet it is constantly distracting. If it was going to sound like this, I feel they would have just been better off of a library of stock wolf sounds. Although, as an aside, I do like how on the splash screen for winning, instead of some quote like everybody else has, Koro's literally just says, woof, woof, woof. I'm not even kidding, that's really f***ing funny.
You looked really cool out there, Koro-chan.
I'm obviously a pretty critical guy, especially when it comes to remakes. But the reality is that if someone wanted to experience Persona 3 and asked me what version of it to play, I would, without a doubt, tell them to play Reload. It is the best version of the game. I don't want to undermine the effort that was clearly put into the remake. Nevertheless, it's a little frustrating, since with every other Persona game, there is a clear, definitive version to play. If you want to play 5, you gotta play Royal. If you're playing 4, you want to play Golden. And for 1 and 2, you want to play the PSP versions. Even with the smaller soundtrack, I still think the PSP version of P1 is the way to go. But for P3, it's always been complicated. You had Fest, which should have been the definitive version since it was everything the original was with more added on, much like Golden or Royal. But then P3P came out and only complicated things because it didn't have the full 3D environments to explore, which certainly took a lot away from the cutscenes. But conversely, it let you control your party members during battle, and of course, it had extra content of its own. Between Fest and P3P, there wasn't a definitive version of the game. It was more just pick your poison / what content do you want. Persona 3 Reload was an opportunity to bridge that gap, and finally address that 3 is still the only Persona game that did not have a definitive version, and as good as Reload is, and while I would call it the best version, I'm still hesitant to call it the definitive version when it's missing the FES and PSP content, on top of certain aspects that I think were done better in the original. It's not like, say, Royal, where again, not much was really changed or made worse. It's just they added more, which is what makes it the definitive version. But hey, like I said at the start, Persona 3 Reload is definitely worth your time. It greatly improved the gameplay, which was, without a doubt, the biggest thing that needed to be addressed. And that new, genuinely fun gameplay loop makes the story itself much more accessible. And it is a story that, even with some missteps, is worth playing through. Before Reload, Persona 3 was only a game I'd recommend to people after they've already played 4 and 5. And even then, my recommendation for 3 came with a ton of disclaimers. Reload is a lot easier to recommend to people, and I think that alone makes it a successful remake, at least in some regard. So if you haven't already, and for some reason watch this video anyway, try the game for yourself and let me know what you think. Either way, those are my thoughts on the game, and thank you for listening to me talk about something way out of my typical wheelhouse. Hey, thanks for watching. I'd like to give special thanks to patrons such as Rami Batter, Amanda Guth, Pretorian Mars, David Pacheco, Drew Kellenberger, Kinzo Tien, Gameplayer 1500, David Marchesi, Ian, Some Crazy Idiot, Evan Halbert, Niji, Alizard, Ralph W. Kelly, Aaron Sandoval, and your boy Busby. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.